Books have always been gateways to knowledge, to stories, to worlds beyond our own. But some books go beyond mere pages and ink. They challenge what we think we know, blur the lines between fact and fiction, and hold secrets that have baffled scholars for centuries. Today, we're exploring 5 more of the most mysterious documents, books, manuscripts, and literary puzzles in history, each one a mystery waiting to be solved. Welcome back to Fireside Unsolved, episode 197, 5 of the most mysterious documents ever discovered, part 3. In the halls of the National Library of Sweden sits one of the most remarkable books ever created, a massive manuscript known as the Codex Gigas, or simply the Giant Book. It's truly impressive in size, nearly 3 feet tall, weighs over 160 pounds, and it contains more than 300 pages. Each page is made from carefully prepared animal skin, likely from around 160 donkeys or calves for the entire book. Opening it is less like turning pages and more like stepping through a threshold into another time. The legends and stories surrounding it only deepen its mysterious reputation. The most well-known tale dates back to the early 13th century at a Benedictine monastery in what is now the Czech Republic. According to the story, a monk there committed a serious offense and was sentenced to be walled up alive, left to die in isolation. Desperate to save himself, he offered something intriguing. If his life was spared, he would create a single book that would contain all human knowledge. It would include the complete Bible, histories, medicine, and magic, and he would complete the entire document in just one night. But as midnight approached, the monk could see the task was going to be impossible. From here, the legend takes a darker turn. In desperation, the monk reportedly sought help, not from God, but from the devil. In exchange for his soul, the devil allegedly assisted in completing the manuscript. To mark this pact, the monk included a pretty incredible full-page illustration of a horned, grotesque figure. Beyond this image, the Codex Gigas contains a unique mix of texts: the complete Latin Bible, works by the Jewish historian Josephus, medical treatises, calendars, and protective spells. However, above all else, what puzzles scholars most is the uniformity of the handwriting. From the first page to the last, the script remains incredibly consistent, as if a single person wrote it all without any variation or signs of fatigue. Given the size of the manuscript, it would normally require decades to complete. Yet there's no evidence of multiple writers or even breaks in time. Some interpret the devil's portrait as a moral warning typical of medieval manuscripts. Others consider it the result of one person's lifelong dedication in isolation. But then there are those who can't shake the eerie feeling that maybe the old story holds a grain of truth. For centuries, the Codex Gigas has been called the Devil's Bible. Whether it was born of obsession, punishment, or something darker, it remains one of history's most haunting documents. The Sumerian king list is written in cuneiform on clay tablets, and at first glance it looks like a straightforward record from the ancient past. A neat list of rulers, their cities, and how long they reigned. But the more you read, the stranger it becomes. The oldest surviving copy dates back nearly 4,000 years, but the events it describes reach much further into the past, to the dawn of civilization in ancient Mesopotamia. It names kings who ruled cities like Eridu, Uruk, and Kish. Yet many of these early rulers are said to have reigned for impossibly long stretches of time. Not years or centuries, but thousands of years. One king supposedly ruled for 43,200 years. Another, over 36,000. According to the list, this era of incredibly long reigns ended with a cataclysm. Then the flood swept over. The text describes a great disaster that wiped out nearly all life. A story strikingly similar to the flood myths found in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical account of Noah. After the flood, the reigns suddenly become more plausible, measured in decades, not millennia. Some historians see the king list as a mix of myth and history, suggesting these exaggerated reigns were meant to show early kings as semi-divine, closer to gods than humans. Others think it might reflect a distorted memory of real events, possibly hinting at an ancient advanced society lost to time. But there's more to the mystery. Not every Sumerian city appears on the list, and some rulers we know from archaeological evidence are missing entirely. Was the king list used as propaganda, a political tool to legitimize certain rulers while erasing others? Or does it still hold hidden clues about a past we don't fully understand? The Sumerian king list isn't just an ancient record, it's a crossroads where myth and history meet, a reminder of how easily facts can blur into legend and legends into facts. The Liber Linteus is unlike any other ancient manuscript ever found, because it isn't written on parchment, papyrus, or carved in stone. Instead, it was written on linen. And for most of its existence, it wasn't kept in a library or hidden in a temple. It was wrapped around the body of a mummy. The story begins in the mid-19th century, when a Croatian official named Mihajlo Baric purchased an Egyptian mummy while traveling abroad, a fashionable, if morbid, souvenir among wealthy Europeans of the time. He kept it displayed in his home in Vienna, proudly showing guests. For decades, no one thought much about the wrappings. They were simply part of the display, nothing more. It wasn't until years later, after Baric's death, when the mummy was donated to a museum, that anyone looked closer. Under the careful eye of researchers, the wrappings revealed something unexpected. Neat rows of writing running across the strips of fabric, preserved for over 2,000 years. The text was in Etruscan, the language of a civilization that flourished in central Italy before Rome's rise to power. Very little of their writing has survived, and most of what we know comes from short inscriptions on graves or pottery. The Liber Linteus instantly became the longest Etruscan text ever discovered, and remains so today. Deciphering it, however, has proven far more difficult. The Etruscan language is only partly understood, and without a bilingual reference like the Rosetta Stone, much of the text is still a mystery. Scholars believe it may be a ritual calendar, describing ceremonies and offerings through the year, but the meaning of the rituals and the stories behind them remain out of reach. How a religious text from ancient Italy ended up in Egypt, cut into strips and wrapped around a mummified body, is another unanswered question. It's possible it was once a valued object, carried through trade, travel, or conquest, before finding its way into an entirely different culture, and then ultimately used as material for mummification. Today, the Liber Linteus is kept in Zagreb, Croatia, alongside the mummy it was once wrapped in. It remains an extraordinary artifact and a still unexplained puzzle, the longest surviving writings from a long-vanished civilization, preserved in the wrappings of the dead. The Smithfield Decretals might appear at first to be a typical medieval manuscript, a 14th century collection of papal letters and church laws, written in careful Latin script. But one glance at its margins reveals something far from ordinary. Scattered through the pages are hundreds of illustrations that have little to do with the solemn text. Drawings of knights battling giant snails. There are human-animal hybrids, odd encounters, and scenes that feel lifted from a dream or a nightmare. The manuscript was originally commissioned in France, but at some point made its way to England, where these vivid and often surreal images were added. Why they were included is still an open question. They could have been inside jokes among scribes, political commentary in disguise, or symbols whose meanings have faded with time. Some scholars believe these drawings were a form of medieval satire, poking fun at the church or society. Others think they served as a kind of spiritual commentary, a way to remind readers of the constant battle between good and evil, the sacred and the profane. The presence of fantastical creatures alongside the church's strict laws suggests a world where the boundaries between reality and imagination were fluid, where humor and religion lived side by side. The Smithfield Decretals is a medieval manuscript that feels alive, strange, playful, and endlessly fascinating. It's evidence that regardless of the time and history, human creativity and curiosity finds ways to break through, even in the most solemn and authoritative texts. Cain's Jawbone is not an ordinary book. It's one of the most difficult and demanding literary puzzles ever created. First published in 1934, it was the brainchild of Edward Powys Mathers, a British crossword puzzle constructor who wrote under the name Torquemada. On the surface, it's a murder mystery. 6 victims, an investigation, and a web of clues. But there's a twist. The book's 100 pages were intentionally printed in the wrong order. To solve it, the reader has to determine the correct sequence, then identify each killer, each victim, and the circumstances of every crime. The complexity is staggering. With 100 pages, the number of possible page arrangements is more than 32 quintillion. Yes, quintillion. That's 32 followed by 18 zeros. Each one subtly changes the story. Solving it requires precision, patience, and an ability to notice the smallest linguistic detail. Only 2 people are known to have cracked the original edition. For decades, its solution was the stuff of legend among puzzle enthusiasts. Then, in 2019, Cain's Jawbone was reissued, sparking a new wave of attempts. Even with modern tools and collaboration, only a handful of readers have managed to reconstruct the narrative and uncover the full truth. Those who do succeed speak of a unique kind of satisfaction, a mix of logic, pattern recognition, and creative insight. The final solution reveals layers of wordplay, obscure references, and connections that reward only the most attentive reader. More than a mystery novel, Cain's Jawbone is an intricate game between author and audience, a story that can only be told when its pieces are placed in exactly the right order.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fireside Unsolved. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time, take it easy and be easy, you filthy bastards.